Welcome to Mermaid.
Hello and welcome back to the show, Screenies. As always, my name is Sammy Parrish and you are listening to The Screen Queen. Last week we made a splash into Mermaid talking about a really unique history of cinematic mermaids, so why not talk about one of the most famous ones that's never been able to go away? Disney's The Little Mermaid. Now, The Little Mermaid is one of literally my favorite movies of all time. I have been waiting for this episode probably since I started the show almost 4 years ago. The Little Mermaid is one of not only my favorite Disney movie, it's also my favorite animated movie. This film is also a special part of my life because it was one of the first movies I saw growing up. There was no way to escape The Little Mermaid. But Ariel herself is a very big deal since she was the return of the Disney princesses. After Sleeping Beauty, unfortunately, was a box office failure, Disney princesses were untouchable, kind of like Kevin Costner. So it lay dormant until finally someone said, hey, why not try The Little Mermaid? It was directed by Ron Clements and John Musker, who had previously worked on The Great Mouse Detective and decided, hey, let's try to bring back the Disney princesses. And wouldn't you know it, it was a success. So let's get under the sea with The Little Mermaid. So the true beginning of The Little Mermaid is actually in 1988. During the production of Oliver and Company, the directors Ron Clements and John Musker were pitching the next feature film to be The Return of the Disney Princesses. And Jeffrey Katzenberg, who is the future owner of DreamWorks, had to disapprove of the idea because, well, Splash came out about 5 years ago. People would not connect it to Hans Christian Andersen's story, no matter how hard the directors pushed it. They were like, that's not bankable. Sometimes you do have to say no to things that are just not the time period. So they decided to make it be in the time period. But there is a lot going up against many other things at the time. Oliver and Company was still in progress with its success. And there was another huge film in 1988 that had to do with animation that required all hands on deck called Who Framed Roger Rabbit? So Ron Clements and John Musker had to go through all of that noise going on to make The Little Mermaid happen. And by doing that, they had to cut a lot of things. They cut the dolphin character that was proposed, and that's how we got Flounder. Sebastian was changed from an English crab to a Jamaican crab that we know and love and dearly miss, Samuel E. Wright. Ariel's grandmother was cut, which probably makes sense why that has bigger presence in Moana. It's from the same directors, but that's besides the point. So of the original 20-page proposition, they had to shorten it to about 2 pages of their content with the major revised additions to The Little Mermaid that we know and identify with. And of course, Ariel's hair had to be red just so that way they didn't come in a, splash catfishing and get in trouble for that. And when Jeffrey Katzenberg took a look at it, he was more approached to it and approved of the idea. So, okay, all right. But the biggest clincher was that they had another person involved with Oliver and Company named Howard Ashman, who is a very famous composer who's done an amazing amount of work, very dearly missed. With the songs that he put into the melody, it made it a little bit more breathable, and you could do a melody-themed Disney movie that seemed cohesive and wouldn't get in trouble with Splash. So it was everything that was marked X got a check by it instead by Jeffrey Katzenberg. But the songs were truly the icing on the cake to get this man to say yes. But one thing that really made it a historical aspect, just to tie in about how far it goes back, because the Hans Christian Andersen story was on Walt Disney's plate. I mean, it was like in his back burner, but there was some key elements used by someone named Kay Nielsen for the proposed 1930s Anderson featurette, which they found was pretty on par with their version, which is a lovely way of seeing that this was truly meant to be. So think about it, something from the 1930s, despite it being a back burner, was able to be revamped in a 1980s style to live today. That's pretty damn cool. So the original concept for Ariel, I've talked a little bit before in my previous episode how her hair had to be red because Daryl Hannah was already blonde and there couldn't be another blonde Little Mermaid. But that wasn't the only thing that has changed. There wasn't supposed to be a flounder. Instead, they had a dolphin character that was going to be Ariel's sidekick, and yeah, that's cute. And I think they played a lot more on that angle in the Little Mermaid TV series where they got to kind of introduce some of their deleted scene ideas. But for the final product, Flounder just happened to flow a little bit more. And yeah, I don't think I can ever really see this without Flounder being that perfect panic to Ariel's adventurous self in the whole adventures, and seeing how despite how panicked he is, he's always there for his adventurous best friend. Ursula's designs were also very unique too. They had her looking a little bit more pointy, a little bit more jaunty. They had her looking very menacing. Now there has been some speculation over the years about Divine, the drag queen, being the sole inspiration for Ursula because Divine passed away in 88 and then Little Mermaid comes out in 89 and they have very similar makeup patterns. But it has been dismissed as incorrect. That it's not actually Divine, it's the animators dressed in drag. So some of them put on some robes to be able to kind of get the figure down. So all that body language is an animator dressing up like that. Yeah. So every time you watch Ursula, that's a man in drag that performed for that role. It's a lovely thing to think about. So there are many different influences that make up Ariel. And there were some that felt pretty obvious. And there were some that I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. So it has been revealed that Alyssa Milano is primarily the base of what they wanted to use for Ariel's facial personality and everything, but there's also a little bit of anime in there. Philo Barnhart was asked if he's familiar with any of the Studio Ghibli films at the time, with like My Name is Totoro coming out, ironically that has Ursula in it. The big anime eyes was something that they wanted to take a influence from and an inspiration from to make something different than the usual Disney princesses that have kind of smaller eyes, but making that anime impact on Ariel really feeds that adventurous personality, like, someone whose eyes just get excited seeing something interesting or adventurous. Another big part in the creation with her hair had to come from an astronaut. There's footage of astronaut Sally Ride back in 1986 with her hair floating. The animators used a lot of her footage of her floating in the air to help see how they wanted to structure Ariel's hair to float. The bangs, though, comes from Christina Applegate and the whole mall bangs trend that was going on back then in the 80s. And of course, this wouldn't have been done without one of the main models involved with this, Sherry Stoner, who served as the model for Ariel and Belle. So Ursula is my favorite villain of all time too. There's a lot of all times that come from this film. There's one thing that has been pointed out about Pat Carroll that I've never noticed, is that she never changes her voice in any of her performances. If you listen to her in Ursula, or the one special in Garfield and Friends, or Pound Puppies, yes, that existed, or her English-speaking role in My Neighbor Totoro, the voice does not change. It is still that gravelly voice that carries on, but, There's only one Ursula, and everything that Pat Carroll gave just made it go a lot further. When you look at the designs for Ursula, there's a lot that went into it. The animator for Ursula, Philo Barnhard, had sat down with her, and she said, tell me all about her. What is she like? And it says, why don't you tell me what you think Ursula is, and then we'll go from there. And then Pat Carroll says, well, I envision her as this Broadway star that's just lounging everywhere. And it's like, yeah, that's a quality I would have never thought that went into it. But then looking at her, she does have a Shakespearean feel to it. And a lot of the other Disney villains do have some or few Shakespearean qualities, but to have an actual theater quality, that's kind of something that you hear about, but when you see it in animation, it's kind of unique to know that's a huge part of what created Ursula. But another big thing that went into Ursula that I found out that I never would have thought in a million years was a influence on Ursula. Dynasty. Yes, that one. There's a character in Dynasty named Alexis Carrington. Alexis Carrington is one of the hugest characters in Howard Ashman's life, and a huge part of his Dynasty love and obsession got carried into the creation of Ursula. It's still another villain that didn't fall to her death, but she still fell-ish to her death. She's also someone that she wants power, and that became a big reoccurring element with some Disney villains is money, power, just kind of go hand in hand until, Maleficent was like, oh, I just wanted to curse a child, thank you. So, yeah, she kind of made a cliche if you think about it. But also, too, this is something I want to point out, she's one of the first villains in the new Renaissance to have the double red eyes when the pure anger and chaos is coming out. You see it in her eyes, and then next you see it in Jafar's eyes for the next film from the directors, and then Hades from Hercules. I don't know why this had to be like the iconic angry eyes, but gotta start somewhere. So even though Pat Carroll absolutely brought her to life, there was a thought about, well, who could have almost been Ursula? And the names I'm going to drop to you is make it going to go, and then, First was Bea Arthur. She was approached to ask if she wanted to be a part of it, but she just said, you know what? It's not my thing, I could see Bea Arthur, but I feel like it would be almost too intimidating. Like, Bea Arthur is a very fun woman, don't get me wrong. I miss and love her very dearly. And then Roseanne was approached. So it's like, okay, you set your standards in a very, very strange way, but I don't think Roseanne could have done it. I mean, I think she could have tried if it was maybe another various Disney villain that could kind of be more suited to her voice. I think that could work. Oh, now it's time for the music of The Little Mermaid. Every one of them is a slapper. But there's one song that almost didn't make it. And that was the titular song, Part of Your World, which, if you think about it, she doesn't ever say part of your world. She says part of that world. But, creative liberties, it still rolls off the tongue. There's not too many complaints you can do about something that doesn't have much complaints about it. But, oh boy, was there complaints about it during the production in 87 to 88, because there was a rush to get this movie out. Because after Little Mermaid came out, they wanted to try their luck and see about trying to get another film done within a year and a half to 2 years. So this was a test run. You can't have any hiccups, but unfortunately, Part of Your World was the hiccup. The song almost got scrapped. There was too much going into this. Like, if the work could be done for free at that point, whatever it took, that's what had to happen. The animator ended up basically threatening Disney, not too threatening, but threatening enough from a creative standpoint of how dare you take away my child that I've created in this project. When you work on something, that basically becomes your baby. They were basically saying, we're gonna, kick your baby out of the movie. The composer and the animator were not having it. They put too much work into it. Jodie Benson gave a perfect performance that she wasn't sure what to do with, and they all made it work. So they pushed to keep it in the film despite what anybody said. They did whatever they had to do to keep part of your world in the movie. The only true damage it did in the long run was carpal tunnel for the animator Glenn Keane that was determined to bring this baby to life. Now, you can't bring something to life without having a part of yourself sacrificed, and that is the noble sacrifice that it took to get part of your world to be there, because the film really wouldn't be the same without it if you think about it. I mean, Ariel has a very bright personality, but when you have that first official song that gets you to know this character, the way that Howard Ashman and Alan Menken brought the score to life, and everyone figured out how to guide Jodie Benson through the scene. They told her to just be on a chair, and they spun her around, and they put the lights down, so it kind of makes it more of the feel that we get, because it's very different than usual songs, and knowing all those bits and pieces they put into it really makes part of your world more than just, a character arc song. We go from Ariel song to Sebastian song, Under the Sea. I mean, that in itself just has a clap of everything because it's such an astounding fucking number. And then you have my favorite song, Poor Unfortunate Souls, which has the honor of being the first villain song too, if you think about it. I don't think anyone has ever mentioned that this is the first return of a Disney princess and the return of the Disney villain songs, which is amazing in itself. But there's a bit that I love that I had found out during the production, another bit to add on for Pat Carroll. Because she was so invested into creating this character with the animators, when the song came up, pathetic. Pathetic was not a line in there, but they made pathetic be in there just because Pat Carroll made it so. That was like the first of the Robin Williams effect of, oh, I like that, so let's add it in there. That carpal tunnel, I'm sure, was not happy about that. And then after that power number comes Les Poissons, which is just the song of a man that really, really enjoys his job about cutting up fish. I mean, everyone's got to have their motto for work. This guy just has a, it's just his. Let's just say that. It's a song that you could skip and miss nothing, but also you skip it and miss everything chaotic. So it's one of those toss and grab, you don't really lose, but you don't really win, but you just kind of enjoy it. And then you have probably the final and best number, not in my opinion, but probably just in general, Kiss the Girl. As much as that song can be a little bit weird, and there's been a lot of people that have critiqued that moment and gone, oh, this is either really creepy or really beautiful or both. And yeah, there's not really a wrong answer for both of those answers. At the same time, I'm not really going to complain to hear Sebastian basically being the wingman to Ariel. At least, God help him, better than Scuttle is. We love him, but, he's not exactly someone you really want to have helping you work that magic, We all need a Sebastian in our life that's going to be given that, get the dick song, as I would say, Oh, man. I especially loved when Screen Junkies did a hilarious bit on it a few years ago when they covered Little Mermaid saying, you wanna pork the girl. It's like I said, it ages kind of creepily and beautifully at the same time. The songs do tell the story in here since it is made to be a melody-driven movie. But the movie and the music made for it exist so well together that I don't think one dominates more than the other. You can still love the plot of The Little Mermaid without the music, or you can love just the music of The Little Mermaid. There's not really a wrong go with the flow here. Because the music is not so overdosed that you get some breathing room, the acting is superb, and the writing is so amazing that when you go into a song, it feels punctual and presentable, not just, oh, let's just rush into songs, which has kind of been the main complaint about Disney today, that they just don't have that rhythm to let the movie flow how it needs to and let the songs flow how they need to. You know, Little Mermaid clearly did it right. I don't know why Disney can't learn from themselves. So the one thing that has been told for many years, and I'm sure many people are reading this without having to look at the Little Mermaid, is it's a little problematic. Now, I love this movie till the end of my days, but I cannot argue that there are some things that doesn't age within itself because of the way it's depicted. And you look at some things that's on the storyboard and all the whole grand scheme of things and go, you know, I get it. It's hard to unsee that Triton is a very terrible father, like terrible all the way in terms of Disney parents. Like he's very up there. He's like almost like the Joe Jackson of the Disney family in a way. It's a little bad. I mean, yeah, the guy had a come to moment at the end where he accepted Ariel, but he did a lot of verbal abuse to get there, and his actions, it's like, are we sure we want to have this guy as a parent and in charge of a whole kingdom if this is going to be as a reaction to the most minor things that can't be handled without some sort of easy communication? Like, yeah, Ariel's a 16-year-old girl, and, you know, you gotta tell someone to not go do something that would be dangerous because you want to keep them safe. But at some point, safety becomes different with how you install those feelings of trying to keep someone on whatever course and path. There was no meeting in the middle at all to understand what Ariel does, and everything was met with yelling, and destroying things. Like, that's not how you get things across. But that was just how Triton was made. I'm not saying it was the times, but I wasn't in charge of that writing department that let them do that. Whoever wanted Triton to be like that, you know, that's on them. But the other thing, too, is the Little Mermaid herself being a little problematic. I liked the way Doug Walker put it, that yes, she's a character that is very zestful for life, but she's a very different character that plays on the other Disney princesses that had very different time spectrums. It was pointed out that Frozen, you know, has more of the things that you shouldn't do that Ariel does. Like, if you put Frozen's whole exact timeline and phrases and, you know, don't marry a man you just met phrases into here, yeah, like, it's kind of funny how it's a play on all the things that Ariel did, but, you know, when did you ever have a character that actually went for the things? It's also been pointed out that Ariel is like an arc corrector. She's, you know, everyone's cheerleader, and she wants the best for everybody. She has such a infectious positivity for life, which does make her a very easy character to get through. Yeah, she has her issues, but, you know, you can't get through life without trying. Oh, also, Ariel and Eric's romance was also kind of a toss-up in the air. There's been a lot of people on the internet that have pointed out, like, how their relationship is pretty much doomed because you don't know a couple things. Does Ariel really eat fish? Her best friend is Flounder. There's a crab who is her guider and mentor. So either Ariel's come to fess up and eat some fish, or Eric might end up taking the whole marine agriculture that has been pretty much the lifeline and inheritance out of the kingdom, and then everyone's gonna be like, okay, listen, dude, glad you found a girlfriend, but we're out of a damn job. And you know who's gonna be leading that whole work union riot against Ariel and Eric? Chef Louis, I have no doubt. You cannot take away his pleasure of chopping up fish. Nope, not gonna happen. So what you gonna do about that? It's just a movie where clearly the whole point is you're seeing a mermaid get to have an adventure and then meet the love of her life that she just decides is the love of her life because Disney logic. But it's those weird questions that do come up through. You have to take it with a grain of salt of having the pros be the cons and the cons be the pros, and just kind of let the movie exist as it is. Like, clearly it would not work on a, like, realistic way. But again, Doug Walker made an excellent point that this film is the same equivalent of what Snow White did, that you put your emotions in the front seat and you put your logic in the back seat. I have loved that line. It stayed with me for so many things. It's changed the way I've seen a lot of these fictional characters to give them a little less grief. because the way this movie was designed was for a happily ever after, not a realistic ever after. So this is kind of a funny note to have to talk about, but it has been confirmed. The way that the animation team wanted to get the final climax across was Die Hard. Yes, that John McClane movie that had to do with a skyscraper was suddenly the inspiration for how they want this to come across. They just said, you got to make it more like Die Hard. It's like, I don't think we're going to have Ursula and Ariel on top of a skyscraper, but that type of intensity. Yeah, if you're going to have a climax like that where it is literally do or die and you got to make something work. I mean, it's a hell of a note, but I'm just secretly waiting for Eric to go yippee-ki-yay motherfucker when he kills Ursula, but it definitely does pay off to have something that was a one-off reference be the sole inspiration for how that climax worked. And lastly, there is one little hilarious animation error I wanted to point out. And no, it's not the penis castle. We've talked about that a numerous amount of times. This is something that has come up recently. In the beginning, when she's talking to Scuttle and she's out of the water, her hair floats like it would in the water. But later on, when you see her turn to a human, the floating hair quality is kind of gone, which I think a lot of them realized, oh shit, we probably shouldn't have given the floating hair to when she was out of the water as like the mermaid, because there are some parts in the movie when you see her hair is flatter. It just happened to be the animators were rolling with it because they had to figure out how do we make her hair float without having to put so much water around it. So, you know, I can imagine you get caught up in making something perfect and fitting the vibe that you never know where the vibe is going to be fitting into other stuff where the vibe is not supposed to be. But as much as it's called like an animation error, it's a little bit whimsy, like her hair floating when she's the mermaid versus her hair not floating when she's the human. It's kind of a nice whimsy factor to know the difference of Ariel's evolution to what she's doing and how she's acclimating to a new life. So here's why The Little Mermaid is my favorite film and why it's so important to me. I've told the story about how I was a little girl and I went through cancer, and Little Mermaid was one of the few things that I watched when I was a kid, but that impact of Ariel's positivity has made an everlasting effect on me. Having someone that strives for a goal, that wants to achieve what she wants to do, albeit, yeah, and she's got some different ideas for how she just goes about it, you know, thinking with her emotions and not with her logic, but you know, sometimes it's good to just think with your emotion because you never know where it's going to lead you to. There are things that you can open yourself to new adventures and new horizons, and you never know where life is going to take you if you don't keep your heart open and keep your adventures always going. Ariel gave me that adventurous part of my soul that no matter how depressed I get, I still want more in life. She's an infectiously positive character that truly was mermaid this way. And honestly, I think that's a good way to sum up The Little Mermaid. Thank you so much for being here for this, not only for this special episode of Mermaid, but probably the most special episode that I have gotten the honor to do. Whenever I hit a major Sammy core piece of media, it automatically becomes a very special episode. So thank you guys for being here. It means a lot to me. Thank you for letting me be part of your world. Until then, you can catch up with me on my little grotto on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen, where I have tons of fun stuff that I update about movies and little fun content. You can find the show virtually anywhere: YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple. Like I said, you put your head out the window and you hear someone screaming about The Little Mermaid. You know, it's just me being part of your world. All right, you guys, you take care now. This is your Screen Queen swimming off. Bye-bye.